Legit or horseshit? Leonardo speaks up. Control what you can and ignore the rest. Stupid. Russo the rabbit. A conversation between Slade and Moats. The first mile. Total disregard. Russo's reward. Look, said Swart. All I'm saying is that they're just preparing to be state champs again. I'm not saying I liked it. Victor leaned in towards Swart. His finger pointed aggressively at him. That was horseshit. To do that to another team is classless. I've never heard you worry about the having or not having of class before, Victor, said Bowden from across the U. So, you agree with Swart? Victor nearly shouted. You think what they did wasn't horseshit? I didn't say that either, said Bowden. He let it rest at that. I agreed with Swart, I thought, but I also was glad that Victor was pissed at him. I thought Swart was going too far by saying it out loud, saying their 8-mile warm-up and cool-down was justified when we were the team that looked bad because of their pragmatic indifference to the ideals of sportsmanship. We were down in the locker room waiting for Coach and attacking each other. Everyone but us Bluebirds was gnawing away at someone else, bickering, disagreeing. We knew, should we open our mouths and state an opinion, that we'd get pile-driven or swirlied. Even Hyder seemed to realize how tenuous voicing a thought would be and kept his trap shut. Those tools shouldn't have done that, muttered Victor. And Turnbow's leading them, for crying out loud. What kind of asshole encourages his team to pull that kind of crap? What kind of coach leads his team in that kind of stuck-up bullshit against another team? He required them to make us look like a bunch of puds. Maybe we shouldn't have let them, said Leonardo. It was a bold move to speak up on the part of my tiny Central American friend. I believe the only thing that saved him from being jammed into a locker just then was Coach's timely entrance. Coach whistled happily as he passed out his Xerox sheets, crammed with cramped handwritten notes, arrows shooting across the page, linking one idea to another. Coach's handout looked like a crib sheet for a test when the teacher says you can use any information you can fit on one piece of paper. It was jammed with comments and splits for every runner, varsity and JV. Coach clearly put hours and hours of work into his notes, but I was sure the Ridgeline runners received feedback in a form that didn't hint at mental illness. I wasn't sure whether to show it to Dad or not as evidence in my case against Martin Vidstein. Over the previous weeks, since I'd conceived my goal of getting Coach fired, I had been collecting evidence. It was not my father's nature to interfere with a teacher or coach, but I believed I was getting close to making a strong case. If Hyder hadn't stepped in during the Loins lecture, I could have used that. Talking about the power of semen with a bunch of teenagers seemed like bad policy to me. But I had to throw it out, because I couldn't bear the thought of listening to my brother talk about masturbation with my mom and dad. Why didn't you just save some time and write pathetic on a piece of paper and copy that and hand it to us? Asked Victor. That wouldn't have been specific enough, said Coach happily. I wanted you to know in exactly what way each and every one of you is particularly pathetic. Thanks for caring, groaned Yost. Look, Coach said, hands on hips. You guys want to bitch and moan? I'll leave for 1 minute, and then, when I come back, you're done. He waited for someone to say we wanted to bitch and moan. Nobody did. Okay then, let's figure out something we can learn here. Make goddamn lemonade from these lemons. Ridgeline's 10 times better than us? Can we deduce that? Said Yost. Yost, said Coach, you shut the hell up. If you don't have anything constructive or hopeful to say, don't say anything at all. Yost pantomimed turning a key next to his mouth. He then threw the invisible key over his shoulder. That should be the last any of us hear from Yost, said Bowden under his breath. Okay then, said Coach with a sigh. Forget them and what they did. Focus on what you can control. Ignore what you can't. What you couldn't control yesterday was this. You couldn't tell them not to make you look stupid by running to our course, beating you like a drum, then running back home without giving you the courtesy of even looking in your face and acknowledging you. That's not true, said Victor, rising up off his seat in agitation. Moats, that big bald bastard, acknowledged Slade at the starting line. Slade made him acknowledge him. Victor slipped his hand out and Slade tapped it. Called him a piece of shit, Victor said proudly as he sat back down. To his face. You called Moats a piece of shit? Asked Coach, looking at Slade. I might have, said Slade, a hint of a smile edging up the corners of his mouth. Why didn't you just beat him? Said Coach. You could have, you know. Slade's smile disappeared. He only ran 16:50. Coach's brown eyes were intent on Slade. You've run faster than that with no competition. Just last week at Frankfurt. You at least could have made him kick to beat you. Slade looked at the floor. I'll tell you why you should be upset, he said to the room in general. And it's not because you lost. We're all going to end up losing sometime or another. It's because you were stupid. You let your pride get the best of you. He was pacing now. The fact that they ran here and showed us up, we couldn't control that. That was their choice. But what we could control, we didn't. And that's stupid. Coach pointed at Keene. What was your first mile split? Keene looked at his sheet. 4:56, he read. What was yours? He asked Hyder. 4:56, Hyder replied. Yours? He asked Slade. 4:53, said Slade. You know what that big, bald piece of shit Moats' first mile was, Slade? Slade fidgeted on his bench. No, he said. Of course you don't. He was too far behind you at the mile mark for you to have any clue what he ran. Coach picked up a piece of chalk from the blackboard tray. 5:18, he wrote on the board. And that's still faster than his average mile had to be to run 16:50. With a 5:18, he had 7 seconds in the bank. 16:50 breaks down to 3 miles at 5:25. As we stood at the line the previous day, the Ridgeline runners, it was true, hadn't even looked at us. Well, except for Moats, when Slade called him a piece of shit. We might not have even been there for all they cared. When Slade cursed Moats, the tall, lanky runner with the shaved head, Moats had grinned at him. Just hang in there as long as you can, Moats had said, as if he were talking to a child. We'll pull you through to a PR. Of course, he said pleasantly, we can't let you break up our pack. His smile disappeared. That's not happening today, or ever. At the sound of the gun, one maroon and silver-clad Saluki broke to the front of the pack in a near flat-out sprint. It was Dennis Russo, I was later to learn, a sophomore not usually in the Ridgeline scoring 5. Slade and Victor's blood was boiling, and they took off hard on Russo's heels through a blistering first half mile, just over 2 minutes and 20 seconds. The rest of our team, whatever our separate and unspoken feelings about Ridgeline's decision to run to their race against us, had joined Slade and Victor in the suicidal chase. You all, said Coach, pointing to the 5:18 on the board, got suckered. What did Russo end up running? Anyone know? Hyder raised his hand. Champ, said Coach. He ran a 17:34, said Hyder. He was the only one of us He was the only one of them that any of us beat. Coach put his index finger to his lips. His brown eyes sparkled. I wonder if Russo thought he was going to win that race. Kitty Cat? Todd Mankato's head jerked back slightly at the sound of his own name. What did you think? You think Russo thought he was going to win that race? You think that sophomore figured he'd run away from John Biddle, third in the state last year? No? It came out more of a gasp than an answer. That's right, said Coach. Russo didn't think he was going to win that race. Ever. Russo was a rabbit, and you were a bunch of stupid hounds that went out too fast chasing him. Coach sat down on the bench next to Leonardo. Leonardo's right, he said quietly. You shouldn't have let them go for a perfect 15 against you. He scratched at the thin black beard he'd started. It must have hurt when that pack of 6 guys ran by you. He glanced across the U at Victor. Did that hurt, Victor, when all 6 of those guys went by in a pack? Victor didn't say anything. He stared at the floor. Did that hurt, Slade, when that big, bald piece of shit, Moats, went by with his 5 teammates? Coach stood and took center stage again. They was talking, wasn't they? he said with a big grin on his face. It looked like they was talking from where I stood. Tell me the truth. They was chatting like a bunch of girls at a lunch table. Slade didn't answer, but I could testify that they had been. They'd been talking about the run home, how they might be able to get Turnbow to let them take a shorter route. That was how slight their regard for us had been. They hadn't even been thinking of us during the race. Here's exactly what happened, if you didn't get it by now, said Coach. On the jog over, Turnbow tells Russo that he's going to have to fall on the grenade and hurt for the team by running a kamikaze first mile. He knows you guys are going to be so mad after seeing his guys run to the meet that your emotions will get the best of you. You'll do something stupid. He tells the other guys to let you go and run even splits, knowing that they're going to run away with the meet because you guys will all be trashed after chasing their rabbit for the first mile. Coach clapped his hands together with a loud pop. And that's just what happened. As I sat there, I saw that Coach was right. His notes might look like a letter from an insane asylum, but they were, I had to acknowledge, on the mark. He might bawl in his car, permit hazing, encourage his runners to eat their radios, but he obviously knew something about racing. This didn't change my feelings for the man. As we put our notes in our lockers and prepared to go run, Coach added one last thing. It was a detail that showed just how observant he could be. Anyone but me notice when those guys took off after the race, running back to Ridgeline, how many of them was running? Nobody had. There was 7 of them, including Turnbow, he said. 1 less than they came to our place with. He flashed a knowing smile. Russo got a reward for falling on the grenade. He got a ride home.